listeners of our program, you're welcome to today's episode. We're going to look at the concept of culture today. As we know, previously, we defined culture as a total way of life of people living in a particular society. We define it as that identity that makes people adhere to completely be members of a society. The norms, the values, the customs, the traditions, the technology all include aspects of the culture, both material and non-material. Today, our discussion is going to look at the concept of culture. Those concept terminologies that we have to understand as students of sociology. One is cultural universality, cultural relativism, ethnocentrism, xenocentrism, subculture, you understand, countercultures, culture lag, culture shock. All these things are what we are going to discuss today. Let's start with ethnocentrism. What does it mean? It's a feeling that one's culture is superior to other cultures. As we've explained in our last lecture, that culture is universal. It's found everywhere, only that the threats differ. But it's anywhere human being exists, there is culture. Because without culture, there is no civilization, and human being would be equivalent to animals. So, ethnocentrism is that feeling that your own culture is more superior, more important than other people's culture. In other words, using your culture as a yardstick for judging other people's behavior and action. That is ethnocentrism. I am from Nigeria, somebody is from United States of America. As a Nigerian, I begin to define the way he eats, what he eats. Basically, their closeness to what I eat. For example, I eat gurasa, he eats pizza. I begin to judge him on some character he's displaying, some of the values he's displaying, begin to wrong them, begin to see them as wrong because they don't look like mine. That is called ethnocentrism. Then xenocentrism is the direct opposite of ethnocentrism. Is feeling that your culture is inferior, that feeling of inferiority complex in your culture, feeling that other people's culture are best compared to your culture, trying to take over other culture and abandon yours, trying to use other culture as a yardstick for measuring your own culture, trying to feel that your culture is not unique, your culture is too traditional, your culture is not to standard. You see, that is xenocentrism, a feeling that other people's culture is the best, trying to adopt other culture thereby neglecting your culture. Just like the way the African society is adopting, advancing, admiring the Arabian society, admiring the European society, and trying to become like them, and thereby neglecting their own culture. The issue is that culture they own, their own culture is their identity. You understand? So the issue is when you begin to feel low in your culture and begin to feel other people's culture are unique, better than your culture, that is xenocentrism. Then third concept is cultural relativism. It's a prescription to ethnocentrism and xenocentrism. If you don't want to fall within any of them, then you should be a cultural relativist. Cultural relativism means judging people's behavior in accordance to their culture. When people behave in a particular manner, do not judge them as deviance or conformity within the norms and values that govern your culture. Rather, you judge them within the norms and values that governs their own culture, because everything about your culture and theirs may vary as a result of cultural diversity. So as such, the best way to think, to judge, to feel is that when people react or counter-react, make sure that you judge them within their own culture, not within your culture. And that is called cultural relativism. Then also within the concept of culture, we have culture lag. Culture lag, L-A-G. Culture lag implies that situation of new invention when it was invented and to the time it will be accepted. You know, when there's something new, for example, when mobile phones were newly introduced in Nigeria, a lot of people see them as, they begin to wonder, how possible is it as a new technology? But gradually, from their invention to their acceptance, that period is called culture lag. Because a lot of phenomenon will happen when they are created. People, some will shy away, some will adopt, some will see them as alien, some will begin to think over and over again. This is called culture lag. Then we have culture shock. Culture shock is when you go to another culture that it's not your culture, and you find some things that are peculiar in their culture that you have never come across. For example, how they celebrate their marriages, how they mourn their deaths, how they elect their leaders, for example. In some cultures, when a leader dies, you see them burying him together with some of his servants. You will be very you find it obviously alien. You find some behavior not really. You find that rejection in the culture, possibly because it does not marry your culture, because you have never seen that. But to those members, to this different culture you find yourself in, they have already accepted as their norms, as their values, as their customs, as their belief, and as their tradition. In some cultural values, when a man died and his wife is suspected, usually after birthing the corpse before burial, they ask the woman to drink the water that they use in bathing the corpse, because in their belief, if she is responsible for his death, the spirit of the dead may affect her, and if she's not, she is cleansed. If you're not part of this culture and you find yourself there either by occupation or by migration or by any aspect, you'll find it very odd. And these feelings of seeing something you've never seen and you never think it exists in another culture that is not your culture is called culture shock. Then we also have what we call subculture and counterculture. When we say subculture, they are smaller cultures existing within the popular large culture. If you come to every society, you find the basic way, the American society, you find the basic way in which all of them operate. But if you go to a group, you find a group having a peculiar way of behavior that adhere to the larger culture but somehow different from the larger culture. That is, for example, you come to Nigeria, you come to some aspect, you find a group of people, their group, they understand how they do their activities together as membership of that group. They identify themselves, they know themselves, they have the same needs, they belong to that group. Usually you find some things they do differ from the popular culture, but it is within the line. Then countercultures are some aspect of culture of some groups within the larger culture that contradict the larger culture. What are we saying? Some disagreement that some smaller groups, culturally groups within the larger culture, a small culture within the larger culture, when they have some disagreement with trying to contradict, when their culture contradict that of the larger culture, we said that is called counterculture. Follow us next in our next episode. Thank you for being a sociologist.